Hey guys, I'm Lazor, otherwise known as Matt. It's a really weird time for me to do any sort of recording, so if I start fucking up my words like I already have in the past 5 seconds, already fucked up twice. That is a really good way to start a video. That's how we want to keep going. But this is one of those deck list things. I don't know. I do these occasionally, maybe one a week, maybe not, but I'll probably just play one deck until I've got it to where I'm like really happy with it, and I'll tweak it card per card per card until it's Kurt per card? No. Until it's the best that I think it is. I run 61 cards, which is frowned upon in some situations. Everyone's like, oh, 60 the best. I'm like, 61's just better. The algorithm, I don't need 25 lands to 60 cards. Yeah, that's 40% lands, I think. And I'm terrible at maths. So if I got that right, then I'm pretty happy with myself, so... 20 would be 30. Yeah, I think I got that right. But there's going to be a couple of controversial things, I imagine. One of which we can see staring me in the face here, the fact there are 2 Jesus Phantasms in the sideboard now. There was a stage where I ran all of them, there was a stage where I ran 0 of them, then I ran 3, and 3 worked pretty well, but 2 works just as well as 3. Now, the purpose behind this is I'm going for a very heavy mill. I'm not going to win by doing damage, because I don't like taking damage. One thing you don't want to do with this deck is slugfest. Unless you've got a couple of these guys down, then you don't particularly want to slug it out with your opponent. Unless you've stole their like best guy they're gonna have. You don't particularly want to be punching each other in the face. You don't want to be taking damage. So this guy, his entire purpose, get him down early, or just borderline when they're on 9 or 10 cards. 9 is hilarious. 9's like the best place if they got 9, 10 cards in the graveyard, but 9's hilarious. And the reason is because when this guy, if there are 10 or more cards in a graveyard, then you get +4/+4. So it's great when you're against burn if they have 9 cards in the graveyard and they go, oh, I'll just do 3 damage to it with my spell. But then it classes the card as going to the graveyard and then the ability going off and then the damage being dealt, so it goes to the graveyard before the damage is dealt for some reason. I could read up on the rule check. I believe I've seen it done a couple of times and I know it's legitimate. So this guy goes up to a 5/5 and they only do like 3 damage to it. It's great, so he's a great card, but in this case I'm using him as a blocker. He doesn't mill and I prefer all the cards that do mill. And by the way, looking at my if you can just have a glance at like the mana curve at the top where it says creatures and stuff, you see there are 0 3-drops in my deck, but look how many 1-drops and 2-drops are. So I like stacking on turn 3, so stacking my 1-drops and using my 2-drops, so for the first couple of turns I end up setting up. So turn 3 isn't that big of a deal, even though there are quite a few strong cards, and I've just found that it doesn't need it. There's only Aether Adepts that are really good. Crippling shit, a lot of the cards are really good and you can swap them in and out. This card is situational. It can be really good when it works, but other than that, it's not that great. It doesn't particularly have that much benefit to me unless they have 20 or more cards in the graveyard, which doesn't take very long to be honest. But if I have this amount in hand, I'll go, oh, I'll keep it until they got 20 cards. It just sits there and dies for a while and does nothing, and then I draw 3. There are other ways of drawing cards that are just much more efficient for me than Visions of Beyond. It's situational, and to be honest, it doesn't seem to work that well in this build. I think it'd be... I don't think it's going to work in like any of the decks, to be honest. I'm going to say it might be better in the other blue deck, but then it's just a 1-cost draw 1, because you're never going to have somebody have 20 cards in the graveyards. Because it says if a graveyard. I mean, if it was both graveyards, then maybe. I mean, it's late game, you draw it, it's okay, but not really in this deck. Counterspell's a great card, probably the best counter spell in the format. There's probably better ones. I think there are better ones, but in the format of Magic 2013, then this is probably the best one. Costs 2 blue, you counter target spell, so for 2 mana in this deck I can counter any spell in the game, to be honest. And you go, oh wow, that's amazing, that's amazing, that's amazing. And then you gotta ask you the question, how does that benefit me in this deck? And I go, it stops me from getting a creature on the board, stops me from using a kill spell. And I go, okay, so what are the disadvantages? Because that sounds really good advantages. Yeah, I see them in the sideboard, right? And I go, well, it means I don't play a card in my turn. It doesn't mill them. it doesn't draw a card, so it doesn't go with any of the combos, and it's situational, because they might not play anything and I've just wasted a turn in which I could have been milling them. And I go, to be honest, the cons outweigh the pros in this deck. I mean, if I was in the other blue deck, I'd be like, okay, what does it do? It counts my opponent's spell, while I sit here and stall, which is what I do with that deck. What are the cons? There aren't any that I can think of. I'm keeping my mana open, but I'm using a stall-based deck, where I'm just stalling to high amounts of mana and smashing them with brilliant, brilliant cards, like Bone Wand, or Mirror, or the one that lets you look at the top of your deck, or the one that gives all your cards rebound. I mean, but in this deck, I like playing spells that mill and actually help me, and speaking of mill and help me, that's what this one does, and yet this one's in the sideboard as well. Now, the thing is to use it, it doesn't come down with any counters on, there's no proliferate, there's no way to put counters on this artifact other than tapping it. But its ability itself is also a tap ability for it to start milling, so by the time you want to be using it, it's when you have 4 counters on it. That's turn 6. Okay, I know this doesn't cost you any mana, but then it's turn 6 that you get any use out of it at all. That's if you drop it turn 2. That's if you have it in your opening hand, or draw it on your first go, or draw it on your second go if you're going second. Then you want to get it around 4 or 3 counters for it to do anything, and then it's just not doing that much, to be honest. Jesus Erasure will do twice the amount of milling that this card can do in my deck. The basic mill 7 for 1 turn, that's going to do a lot more than this is, and it's going to do a lot more damage early on. Sure, if it gets going and you're in a stall situation, then it's going to do work. I agree with that, but you might want to run this in Two-Headed Giant, where you're almost guaranteed to get to late game. But in this deck, I want this to be smooth runnings. I don't want to have to be waiting on grind clock for me to start to get effects off. I want to be going smooth. I want to be moving quickly, and grind clock is just a little bit too slow for what it's capable of. It could be capable of so many good things, but in this deck, it's just not capable of enough. I said capable enough, I think. Wow, I just repeat myself but I used them in different contexts. You like that? That was good. It's good. This card's really good. Like I said, I'm going to be saying this about every card in the game. I'm almost certain. This card's really good, but I'm not running it. Blue spells you cast cost 1 colorless less to cast. It's good. It saves you mana. But the thing is, it doesn't mill. It doesn't draw me cards. It has the same cons as Counterspell, and it has almost the same pros as Counterspell. I mean, I tap out. In the long run, it costs me less mana. But, I mean, the most expensive thing I have is, what, 7 mana? But this entire purpose is pure late game and pure opening hand. So, I could have it down a turn earlier, but 2 cards, that's it. Turn 5, I've got quite a few turn 5s and a few turn 4s. I guess it could bump up my turn 4 slot into my turn 3. But then I've got a bunch of 2-drops and 1-drops that are just getting pushed back until later on that won't be getting used, and my hand starts to overflow a bit. I noticed with having these in, it kind of ruined the synergy a little bit. It kind of forced me to play, or made me play other cards in a different order than I wanted. Because I played this turn 2, which means I didn't play any mill. Then turn 3, instead of still not playing any mill, I might have played 1 on turn 1. I'm now playing my turn 4 cards. My turn 2s and my turn 1s have got no use so far. Sure, they get used later, but I would prefer them to do initial early damage. I like milling them straight off the go. It really, really fucks with people's plans. And to be honest, it just ruined the synergy for me. It just didn't seem to do much. It seemed to, like, let's say there's a train, right? I'm going to use whatever it's called, I'm going to use something. Let's say there's a train, now there's carts in the train, and then there's 1 empty cart, which is going to be my land drop 3 spot. Now if I put this in the 2 spot, it crushes the land drop 3, and it makes it non-existent. But then all of a sudden the train, because it's crushed, this box, it's not moving as quickly, it's not moving as fluidly, it's a bit wobbly and all over the place, and it's just not doing what it was before. Having the gap in land drop 3, not having this in, kind of created a little bit more flow in the deck for me. But if you disagree, disagree. Aether Adept, brilliant card yet again. Here we go with the pattern of all the cards are great in this game. It's a 3-cost 2/2 guy who bounces a creature and is a blocker. So in a way, this does fit the deck. That's why I used to run it, that's why I was running it, but I don't run it now because it fits the deck, it's just other cards fit better. That is it. That's what I'm going to say on this card. It's a brilliant card, but other cards fit better. I had to choose between this and the other unsummons in this deck, which is Unsummon, which is a 1-cost instant, and Into the Royal, which is a 2-cost instant that can also be a 4-cost instant. So it was between these two and Into the Royals mainly, but I went with Into the Royal because it's a little bit more diverse, and when I cost it for 4 I draw a card as well, and it's at instant speed. I decided out of those two, there you go. You'll notice Into the Royal took the place of quite a few cards, even though I don't have that many Into the Royals in this deck. Crippling Chill is a great card. It gets rid of a attacker for 2 turns because you do it on their step and then they don't untap, and you draw a card, so it does fit the deck. It does stop you from getting hurt. You do draw a card, but it doesn't have enough benefit compared to other cards that I'd like to be playing turn 3, and I know I say I've got no turn 3 slot, but that's a little bit mixed, I guess. It's a little bit, I can't think of the word, hidden. No, it's not hidden, it's similar to hidden, but I mean my turn 3 slot looks non-existent, but is actually, there's going to be a lot going down turn 3 most of the time. That's what I was trying to say. But yeah, another great card, Sands of Delirium. This is situational yet again. It costs 3, so it could have its own space. I was running it for a bit. I just never found it to like do anything. I'd have it on the field and it would just sit there and I'd go, I'm playing cards constantly a turn. I mean, the only time this would do anything is if it became to the late game and I had no mana to spend on. But with all the card draw that I'm running in this deck, I tend to be either tapping out each turn or getting close to tapping out each turn, which I guess you could say, oh, you could still run it then. And I go, but no, I tend to be drawing enough cards, wanting to play, wanting to do and control, and this just, it got a little bit in the way. It's great. I would definitely run it if I wasn't running as much card draw as I am. If I went, because there's another way you can run this, which is a very creature-based way, which I personally have found a lot less success with than the build I'm running at the moment. And if you go the creature-based way, you've got to run Sword and Body and Mind. This is what I thought people will get controversial about, is Sword and Body and Mind and the Jaces. A quick creature gets +2/+2, protection from green and from blue. If you hit them, your opponent mills 10 cards, and you get a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield. So, and its equip cost is 2, its play cost is 3, so the earliest you're going to be using this is, let's say, turn 4, right? Turn 4, we'll say turn 4. Let's say you have a Jace Phantasm on the field, you equip this, you swing for 7, they mill 10, you get a 2/2. That sounds brilliant. That sounds really, really good, and just because it's a sword, my mind was a little bit clouded, my vision was a bit blurred. All I saw was, oh my god, it's a sword, it must go in the deck, and I'm almost certain like most other people will think that as well. But the reason is that it doesn't get equipped to anything in my deck. I don't have enough creatures to take advantage of Sword and Body and Mind. I play Sword and Body and Mind turn 3 and it sits there, and I go, okay. Alright, now I'm just going to mill them for a bit. Mill them for a bit. Mill them for a bit. I don't have any creatures on the field. Sword and Body and Mind just sat there like, sup, if you can hit them with me once, I've done all I needed to do. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but let's wait for some creatures, you know. I got a creature in hand, but he won't be able to attack till next turn, and I can just mill them for like 10 here, and yeah, I'm sorry, Sword and Body and Mind. It's just sat there going, it's okay, it's okay. But that's all that ended up happening in every game I played Sword and Body. There was one game that I hit them with Sword and Body and Mind, and to be honest, another card that I've put in since would have done the exact same thing, or would have done the exact same damage if I had that card on that turn, because it wasn't until like turn 6 that I actually managed to get it equipped and hit somebody with it. Because, well, in fact, no, it was later than that. I had to play the sword and the creature and equip it on the same turn to make sure my creature didn't die, and then it was weird. It was really, really strange. But in fact, no, I had the creature down and I had to play the sword and equip it, so it was at least turn 5 plus, and that was then I could have used a different card that milled pretty effectively in the same situation. So this guy, if I was running creature heavy, I'd run. I ran him for a bit, but in my deck he's just a 4-cost 2/2 guy who can do a little bit, but doesn't particularly do that much. Target player draws 2 cards, which is okay, then discards 2 cards, which is okay. I mean, I'm forcing them to cycle their hand a little bit, and I can always choose myself, but he doesn't seem to work. He's not as effective as I would like him to be. Like I said, if I ran it creature heavy, I'd be running Sands of Delirium, Kel'Thuzad, Sword. I'd be probably running most of this sideboard, would probably be in a really creature heavy version of this deck, but I'm running a very draw heavy version, so I like to draw cards. Ice Manipulate is a fantastic card, and it pains me to see it in the sideboard, but it was either this or Royal. Like I said, Into the Royal took a few places, and I was like, okay, I need a 4-cost card that can manipulate the battlefield for me, and will work on a consistent basis whenever I draw it. Most of the time it's going to do something good for me. That's kind of outside of the mill aspect, and I was like, okay, I got Icy Manipulate, it's a great one. What else have I got? I got Sleep, I got these guys, and it's not really that great. And then I went, okay, so let's have a look what my 4-drops are here, and I got Clone, Font, and I was like, wow, it's really good. Wheel and Deal, it's really good. So it needs to compete, so these are like my ones. So I was like, okay, it's going to compete with Clone. It's not going to beat Clone in this situation. What else does it compete with? Well, it gets beat by that, gets beat by that, gets beat by that. I was like, okay. I still want it in the deck, and I decided Into the Royal is just one step slightly forward. It's just one more, it's just slightly better. Because first of all, if your opponent uses any sort of pump spell, when they're attacking, any sort of combat trick, Ice Manipulator cannot react to that. Into the Royal can. Also, I can't play Ice Manipulator turn 2. I can play Into the Royal turn 2. And no draw a card, which goes with the common theme of the deck anyway. So, Into the Royal took the slot of Icy Manipulator. If you want to run them, take the Royals out, but I don't advise it. Sleep is one of those cards I've been switching in and switching out. I find myself in situations where I go, oh, if I had Sleep, I'd be okay. But then I find myself in other situations where I'm in the complete opposite boat. I have Sleep in hand and I don't need it. But I just found the times that I need it are a lot less than the times that I don't. It might be 1 in every 6 games I need Sleep, or 1 in every 5 games I need Sleep, and 4 out of 5 I don't. So I don't want a dead card 4 out of 5 games if I draw it. 4 out of 5 times I draw it, sorry. Vidalcan Entrancer. If I was running creature heavy, he'd be great. Otherwise, it's pretty bad. Is probably like one of the worst cards in the deck, to be honest. A 1/4 is good at blocking, I guess, and he taps and does 2. Is that it? Top 2 cards of his. I mean, if that was 4, that'd be great. But 2 for what? There are mere folk that are like 2 costs that do the same thing and have 2 power and 1 toughness. They do I think it or might be 1/2s for 2 mana that do the same thing. I don't want to have to be paying 4. Have you seen what you're competing with in the 4? We just went over it. You don't. They're not even on the same level. I'm sorry. If I ran it creature heavy, then sure, but I don't, so I won't. Let's get this name right. Scalpelexus. Yeah, I got that right. Flying 1/5, so its power is nothing. The toughness is kinda useless. And I'll give you the reason why in a second. Whenever Scalpelexus deals combat damage to a target player, that player exiles top 4 of his cards. See, we got 4. See, Entrancer couldn't do that. If any of those cards if any 2 or more of those cards at the same time repeat this process. So the only time I would see this guy being useful is if I hit him, it milled him for 4, which is good, and then they got 2 or more lands, so then it can mill him for another 4. But that's basically, how can I put this? Your opponent's about to be mana flooded, and you stopped that. I mean, I'm going to stop it most of the times anyway, but also he's a 1/5. I mean, his toughness is really high, which would make him a really good blocker, right? Except they gave him flying and this ability where you want to attack with him, making his blocking his toughness basically almost negated. And if they have any flyer that has more than 1 toughness, they can block this guy. Any day, they can just sit there and block Scalpelist, and there's nothing I can do about it. I'm swinging in with a 1/5, and then you go, oh, you hold back then, don't you? You hold back, and I go, yeah. But then I've just got a 1/5 wall for 5 mana, and it's just sit there waiting for something to happen. When, to be honest, every time I've run him, he's never done anything for me. Similar with like a couple more of these cards. This card's really good. Yet again, I was thinking about running it, but I decided my deck's not really relying on dealing them damage, so Sturmgeist would fit the same role as, let's say, well, we'll say, as the Jace's Phantasm. It would fit the exact same role. It would be a blocker that flies. It would be a flying blocker, except this one costs 5 mana, and when it deals combat damage to a player, I draw a card. So there's that same thing as Scalpeless. I want to kind of attack with this guy to get his benefit, right? But then he doesn't fulfill the role that I just mentioned before, which is I want him to block. So he kind of negates his roles a little bit. So I either want to block with him or I want to attack and draw a card. So it gives me the options, I guess. He's got a little bit of options, but to be honest, I'd rather him have a set role. I think every card in this deck has a set role to do, and it's a little bit all over the place. And it's Stormgeist's power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand. Most of the time it's going to be about a turn 5, 4/4, maybe 4/4, 5/5 flyer. That's pretty good if I draw a card as well. His power goes up. But I mean, look at my mana curve. There's a lot of 1-drops, a lot of 2-drops. I'm going to be playing a lot of cards from my hand as soon as I can. Also because I don't particularly I am drawing a lot though. It is good. I mean, I don't know. He's a great card. He just doesn't do it for me. He just doesn't do it for me. I think like most of these cards near the end are completely opinion based, right? I mean, if you want to run this guy, take Traumatize out, put him in, okay? That's all I've got to say. But Traumatize has done me work recently. I mean, I take him out and I'm like, oh god, I've got no, why I haven't milled him at all in like the past 4 turns. Oh my god, I wish I'd Traumatized. And then games where I've gone, oh, I haven't milled him at all, and I've had Traumatized, and I go, I'll Traumatize you for 20, I'm back in this game. Stormgeist, he doesn't do that. You play him and and he relies on what you're up to, so he's kind of also not an incentive for you to play cards, right? So the more cards you play, the weaker he gets. So that's another thing you got to take into account. This card I ran for a bit. It's a very slim chance it will work, and it's a pretty risky card, I guess. I mean, Talon performance, if you don't know what it does, I might as well say. Sorcery speed, target opponent reveals cards from the top of his library until he or she reveals a creature card. All the others go into the graveyard, and you get the creature card. So that does 2 things. It steals a creature, so I get a creature out of this for 5, and I get to mill them a little bit. However, it only really does well against a few decks. So it does well against the mono blue, even though it's still been wrecked by it before against the other mono blue. It does well in the mirror, and it does well against the burn deck. And now the rest of the decks are mainly creature heavy, to be honest, and the chances of me getting a good creature or a high amount of mill, which is you want one of the two when you play this card, is pretty low most of the time. I end up getting the shit end of the stick when I play this card. It's like Polymorph was in the old game. It was a risk. It was a risk that you could take, but that was in a deck where there was a big risk. How can I say this? Little risk equal large reward. Now this is a decent risk because it's 5 cost, which Polymorph was, but I don't have that much ramp, and it could have medium reward or slightly high reward if I get it right, but it's just it doesn't particularly worth it most of the time. I hope I'm making sense, because my brain's saying you're not making any fucking sense. What are you saying? But I hope I am. This guy is great late game. Shroud +4/+8. If a library has 20 or fewer cards in it. But I've said it before, this isn't about me killing them with their life total going down to 0. It's about me killing them with their deck going down to 0. He's a really good blocker, sure, because he becomes an 8/16. But it costs 7 mana. He doesn't mill my opponent. And to be honest, he has very little, brings very little to the table in terms of what the deck is about for me, how my deck is built. So, to be honest, I'd rather run Chancellor. People were saying, don't run Chancellor, don't run it. I was like, okay, I won't run it. I'll take your advice for a little bit. But things just didn't work out anywhere near as well without Chancellor in it. But I'll get to that in a little bit. I'm just going to mention that the decks, I don't know how the algorithm works in this game, but there are certain cards that you'll never see, which is really weird, unless you run like one of the other, a different card, and then you'll see that other card all the time. Example would be Nighthawk in the mono black. There's one Nighthawk, yeah, game after game after game, or a very high percentage of games, I will get that Nighthawk in my opening hand or before turn 3. It's weird, and yet there are other cards in that deck I just haven't seen at all, or in certain decks I go, I completely forgot I was running this card. When I ran Tellum in Performance for a little bit, I must have had 20 games and played it twice. And yeah, I'd draw Wheel and Deal or something similar. Not Wheel and Deal. I draw like one other card that's a singleton in this deck, and I draw it over and over again when I was running singletons, just to see how they would work. I would draw that game after game after game. So it was really difficult to like judge whether this was going to be a good card half of the time, because I really wanted to draw it quite often, because I was like, well, I want to test Tellum in Performance, and then I would never draw it. So, but what I've had, when I have drawn it, it hasn't been useful that much, so that's why it's in the sideboard. I wish I had had more practice with it, and I guess you could say, oh, you could have deck tested longer and not done this video, but I've got to the point where I think this deck is at its like peak or its pinnacle. Even if that deck curve is really off-putting to me, seeing nothing in 3, but I understand that it works to me. Hedron Crab is like one of the best creatures in this deck. I mean, let's just compare, right? Hedron Crab to Valkenrev Entrancer. Okay, the pros for Hedron Crab, he cost 1, okay? He cost 4 times more. Okay, what do you get for that 4 times? You get a 1 more power and 2 more toughness. You get a tap ability that puts the top 2 cards of his library, so you can do that every time you have a mana open, so let's say that's about 90% of the time you have that guy open. Okay, Hedron Crab, turn 1, you get to play this guy, and whenever a land enters the field, you put the top 3, your opponent puts the top, you mill them for 3, basically, you mill them for 3, this guy you mill them for 2, you're gonna have maybe 80% chance of playing a land a turn, but you get it 3 turns earlier. I'm gonna say Hedron Crab is much better, and I'm gonna say that Valkenrev Entrancer could be really good if I built the deck around creatures, like I say. Jace Phantasm, I only run the 2 based on the fact that they are mainly for blocking, they are not for milling, they do not draw cards, but they are cheap and effective blockers, and when I didn't run them, the deck just didn't seem to run as well, so I put 3 back in, it ran a little bit better, but then I noticed there was a card that I was missing that I did need, and I decided to run 2, and I found no problem running 2. 2 seems to be a good amount. The card that I was missing was Prosperity. This card was frowned upon in M12 because I was like, oh my god, my opponent draw cards and me draw cards, that's horrible. And then I go, in this deck it does work. It just, oh my god, it is such a good card in this deck. If you play it at the right time, if you can save this card until the optimum moment, this card will win you games, right? So I'm gonna give you a quick tip, right? Okay, so if you build the deck like I do, see there are 13 1 costs. This costs us 1, but never play it for less than 3. Turn 3 is pretty good if I have a gap. I tend to play it turn 3, I don't mind. But late game, always keep 1 mana open. Right, okay, so if you're gonna draw 4 or 5 cards, always choose it so there's 1 mana open. Especially if it's coming down to the wire, which most of the time it is, because that 1 mana could be Jace Phantasm, Hedron Crab, Thought Scour, Tome Scour, Unsummon, okay? It could be any of those. And I always find I'm like, okay, I need to mill him in this turn. I'm gonna spam Prosperity, and it came down to where I didn't quite mill him, but if I kept the 1 mana open, I would have been able to use the Tome Scout or the Thought Scout to finish him. And I've just found that leaving the 1 mana open, even though sometimes you don't always get the mana to spend, it's a much better risk-reward situation like we were on about earlier. Leaving that 1 mana open could make or break the game in a lot of times. And keep it. That's just a tip for you guys who are watching this. If you're going to use Prosperity in the late game, to draw you a ton of cards to fuck your opponent over, which is what you've got to use this card for, so it goes so well with certain cards in the deck. Always leave the 1 open. There you go. Little pro tip there. Thought Scour, it's an instant, it mills my opponent for 2, and I draw a card for 1 mana. There is nothing wrong with this card at all, except for the image. The image is a little bit creepy. That guy's getting his brain like stitched together or stitched apart, I can't quite tell. It's really, really weird. It's like maybe they're using Gataxian Pro on him. If you don't know what that card is, then big ups to you. It's a card in standard, it's pretty good. Maybe that's what they're putting him, like probing him. This thought scouring, after all. But yeah, you always use that in your opponent's end step, every time. Unless, well actually, if you have this in your opening hand, use it in your opponent's end step. Mr. Steve Lethal coming online, hiding the draw a card mechanic. Otherwise, you might as well just use it in your main turn to draw a card. If you've got mana you can spend, but if you haven't got anything to spend, Thought Scour in the end step. It actually exists now. Tome Scour, target player puts top 5 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, so what he's basically doing there is just throwing away the top 5. It's pretty good, it's very good value for what it is, so 5 cards away off the top of your library for 1 mana. I like it, it's good. Unsummon, it's a 1-cost instant that basically returns target creature to its owner's hand. So this is good because if they have any sort of pump spell, like I said earlier, Combat Tricks, which is the why I run it over the Aether Adepts, it's really, really cheap as well. It's 1 mana. 1 mana, like I say, that 1 mana somehow does work in this deck. It returns target creature, so that big threat swings in. I like taking hits with this deck. It's really weird. I can go, oh, I can take a hit here because I can mill him for like 20 next turn with Headrun Crabs or something like that. But unsummons that point where they go, oh, Primal Bellow, and you go, oh, unsummon. They go, oh, frown. Or if they think they're going to win, you unsummon them, and then the next turn you draw the nuts, which is what happens when I play anyway. Howling Mine, each player draws an extra card. Not really that good of a card in general, but in this deck, it works really well, and I'll give you, and you go, oh, why does it, what's the cons? Your opponent draws a card. What's the pros? You draw an extra card, okay? But there's another pro, which is the same as the con. Your opponent draws a card, which technically mills them a card off the top of their deck, but they get to use it. So, when you think about it, this is a consistent mill, but they get to use the cards. Now, when mixed with other cards that are in this deck, it just does everything you need it to do when you need it to, and we'll get there in a little bit. Into the Royal, we talked about this a little bit. Unsummon, target non-land permanents, so that's enchantments, artifacts, anything that's non-land creatures. You can pay the kicker cost if you wish, and you get to draw a card as well. So drawing cards, as we're starting to notice already, starting to get a little bit of the theme going. Draw and unsummon, draw and control, draw and mill. Jace's Erasure, every time you draw a card, your opponent puts the top 1 of his library into the bottom of his onto. Right, try that again. Whenever you draw a card, you may have a target player put the top card of his or her library into the graveyard. Finally got that. Woo! That was difficult. So let's say this guy. You draw 2 cards. Jace's Erasure mills them for 2. They draw 2 cards. That's 4 a turn. That's 4 every time it returns to their turn. That's 4 without you paying anything else. That's 4 with just what you've got on the board with Howling Mine and Jace's Erasures. So 4 a turn, it builds up, especially when you go, oh, Mind Sculpt for 7, or double Mind Sculpt for 14, like I did to Frizzy earlier to win a game, which is pretty fun. When I was deck testing this, I deck tested this against Frizzy and some other people as well. Target opponent puts the top 7 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. It's the his or her bit that fucks me up. I don't know what that's doing to me. This guy, your opponent has a really good creature down, and now so do I. Your opponent has something that can work well as a blocker, now I do as well. Your opponent is in a threatening position, and now he's not threatening me as much. That's Clone in 4 mana, that's as quick as I can say it. Dreamborn Muse is the fucking best card in this deck. I'm almost certain if they can't deal with this guy in 2 turns, you've won. You've probably milled them. Because it's the top X card. Right, so at the beginning of their upkeep, before they draw a card, it's the amount of cards in their hand gets milled off the top of their deck. Now, let's go back a little bit. So we're going to be keeping a constant flow of cards in their hand with Howling Mines and the card that comes after Drainborn Muse, which would be Font of Mythos, which is each player draws an extra 2 each turn. Now the disadvantage to Drainborn Muse is that it's not very good in the mirror because it mills you as well, which is a pity, but you just don't play it in the mirror unless you know you're going to mill them that turn, which sometimes you are going to do. But that card will win you the game. So. Yeah, and what's the other card that I was on about earlier? I said get back to Prosperity, was that it? So, let's say I have Dreamborn Muse down. They have 7 cards in the hand, because most of the time they end up doing when they play against this deck. It mills them for 7. They draw 3 or whatever, and then they struggle to play in the back at 7 again, because you can only play so many cards a turn, so there's such a thing as drawing too many. It returns to my turn, I have Jace's Erasure down, I draw 3, I mill them for 3, I mill myself for 5 or 6 or whatever. I then go to my end step and I go, Prosperity for, I have 7 mana, Prosperity for 5, so that's 6 mana down, keep my 1 open, obviously, play, so I then mill them for 5 off the top of the library from Jace's Erasure. They draw 5, which means they have, what, 12 cards in hand. I then play Tome Scale, which is another 5 off their deck. So how many have we got so far? 7 plus 3, so that'd be 10. And then we got the 5 on top of that. Then we got the other 5, so that's 20. Okay, then we got this 5, so that's 25 so far with what we've done so far. We pass the turn. They've got 12 cards in their hand. Dreamborn Muse mills them for an extra 12. So I've completely lost track. What is that? 37 cards? That's over half a library in a turn. Oh, and then they draw 3, so that's 40 cards with that combination. And I've done that combination game after game after game. Prosperity is so good if you have Dreamborn Muse down, because their upkeep, they have too many cards in their hand, and then Dreamborn Muse just mills them for that too many cards. It's great, it's great. Wheel and Deal. Now this card is hilarious, right? So they go, oh, I'll draw Font of Mythos, draw all my cards, okay? And then they go, oh, and then before they play anything, because it's an instant, this is what you want to do. Before they play anything, you then wheel and deal them. So they have 9 cards in their hand, and they all go in the graveyard. And then they draw 7. Or you see a threat on the field, and you go, tap 1, unsummon your guy. Your turn. They draw their card out, wheel and deal, it's now in the graveyard. Sorry, that threat that you were thinking of playing again this turn, no, it's not gonna happen, it's not gonna happen. But yeah, any number of target opponents, each discards his or her hand, and draws 7 cards, and you draw a card. I mean, when you read that, you go, oh, that's really bad. I don't want my opponent to get a fresh 7. And you go, even if that guy does have some sort of galaxy for a crotch, but wow, that's a really weird image. I should like not show that to children, because it's like, oh, look under my cloak, kiddies, and it's like got some weird galaxy. You can see your world from here. Oh, and like jumps out the window or something. That went weird, but that card's suspiciously effective at what it does. It's suspiciously, because I'm like, oh, this card isn't that great, and then you use it, and it goes, oh, well, that went better than expected. That went really, really well. It doesn't make any sense, but it works. This card wrecks green, by the way. It's so fun. Turn 2, they go Nature's Law, and you go, Archive Trap, I'll play it for 0, mill you for 13. And they go, wait, what? I'll just look for a land, guys. And they go, yeah, but it says if your opponent searched his or her library this turn, you may pay 0 instead of 5 mana. That's pretty good. You don't see it used that often, but it really wrecks green, which is good in general. Or Runescar Demon, they go, I've got the best card I could need in this situation where now I can win next. Oh, there goes the rest of my library. Oh dear, oh dear. But there you go. And anyway, 5 mana for when you need it for Archive Trap. It's really good. 5 mana to mill 13. It's really good. And it does get milled into your own deck, which is not terrible in some situations, because it's pretty terrible if it gets milled into your own, but there you go. It's a risk you gotta take when running this kind of deck. Body Double. Enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature card in any graveyard, which is really good yet again. Let's go, oh, I milled your Inferno Titan. Oh, I now have your Inferno Titan. Notice a pattern. There's a lot of it's not supposed to win me the game. This card will definitely not kill them by itself, but it will make them cry a little bit on the inside. It will fuck their day up, and it will their best creature will sit there against them and either A, it will kill them, because sometimes I might just go for the damage if I have an 8/8 trample on the field, or it sits there as I mill them without them being able to touch me. So one of the two. It's a really good card. It's versatile against like every deck. It has a power play. So mind control. I control enchanted creature. I go, oh, your guy you just played that turn has summoning sickness. He's now on my side. Hope you didn't want him or anything. Hope it wasn't like good for you, because he's good. It's going to be good for me. Just going to sit over here for a while and be good. So that's what that does. It gives you a blocker and removes the creature from your opponent's play at the same time for 5 mana. It's good. It's good in this deck. Traumatize, we were on about this. It's really good. If you need to fight and scramble back into the game, Traumatize is that card. That is the card that you go, okay, I've taken a bit more damage than I wanted to. I haven't really milled him for that much. He's at about 40 cards. Come on, what do I need? Land, Traumatize. Now he's at like 20 cards. You can mill 20 with a good turn. You can mill 20 cards easily. I've milled, I think, maximum like maybe 30, 40, 50 cards in one turn. No, probably not 50. I think that's a bit excessive. I would have probably already milled them quite a bit. But most of the time, 20 is going to be your peak number. 15 is still a pretty good number to get with Traumatize. That's still 15 for 5 mana, which in any case is really good. But you just need to keep an eye out for it. It's one of those cards that, oh, you're beating the mill deck. I think he hasn't particularly milled me that much, and then the reason is because they've been holding back so they can traumatize you for the maximum amount, and then they can use their other mill spells to kill you, which is what I tend to do if I have Traumatize my opening hand. By the way, I tend to wall off for a little bit, not play any Mind Sculpt or anything like that, then Traumatize and then kill you in 2 turns afterwards. This guy, people saying don't use him, I was like, okay, I took him out and I was like, oh, there's something missing. I really something missing, and then I realised it's when he's in your opening hand, he wrecks them. If you have this guy in your opening hand before turn 0, before turn 1, so it would be turn 0. They have 7 cards in their library, from their library into their deck. If they have 7 cards in the library and the rest was in the graveyard, I realised how good this would be. But no, they have 7 cards in their library now. I said it again, in the graveyard. Oh, corrected myself and then fucked it up again. But it flies, and it's a 5/7, so it's a good block and a good aggressor. So if you want to run a creature heavy deck, you can still run this card. If you want to run a more defensive mill version, draw a fuck ton, you run this card, because, well, it mills, and when it comes into play, it steals one of your opponent's instants or sorceries from their graveyard and uses it against them. Somebody was running Bountiful Harvest against me, which in that situation was, I would have died the turn after. And I was like, okay, Chancellor of the Spire, take your Bountiful Harvest, I'll gain my life for the amount of lands, I can block, live the turn, Mind Sculpt twice, and win. And it's great. Oh, you go, okay, what do I have? Let's have a look at this opening hand. Okay, low cost, 3 land, and then you see Chancellor of the Spire in the end, and you're like, it's a 7 card, I won't be able to play it till turn 7, but it has an effect turn 0. It works turn 0. It works straight away. The worst time to draw this is off your first draw. Obviously, the same with any big creature in any of the decks. But the fact that it works in your opening hand is brilliant, and the fact that it just an initial mill for 7, you don't realize how it's so valuable in this deck. But that's the 61. I hope I was thorough enough. Thorough was the word. I can't speak now. I actually started to lose the will to speak and the ability to speak, and it's actually becoming really warm in this room, which it tends to do at times when I have the Xbox and the PC and the doors and the windows closed. But that's the 61. I might try and run it with a creature heavy build like I was on about earlier, but I know this deck runs smoothly. It really does. There are a couple of changes you can make if you want to make it your own. This is all opinion based. This is my opinion, clearly. If you want to argue against an opinion, go for it. I mean, I'm just going to be like, to be honest, I think it works the best. That's how I've run it. It's probably how I will run it for a while, so there you go. At least until any sort of an expansion like adds another 10 cards that are really good, and I go, oh my god, what am I going to take out? Hopefully that doesn't happen, even though I kind of do want it to, but I really don't want to get wrecked again by making these decks. But that's going to be Dream Puppet, so I hope that helped. I mean, don't expect this deck to be competitive at all, because it gets wrecked by goblins, gets wrecked by peacekeepers, gets wrecked by exalted. Can beat the rest of these decks. Born of Flame is a really close call with Born of Flame versus Dream Puppets and go either way. Pack Instincts is the same. If they get the fucking Timbermoor Lava and you haven't dealt with it, that will fuck your day up. Timbermoor Lava though I think fucks up every deck in the game that can't deal with it. Goblins, like I said, is too quick. It's too strong to deal with it, but that's Dream Puppets. It's at the moment, I'd have to say it's the most fun deck for me personally to play is Dream Puppets. The strongest deck for me to play is Peacekeepers. But we've already done Peacekeepers, so move on Dream Puppets. And by the way, I have put Flicker Wisp, I think it is, or whatever it is, in the deck, but I haven't used it yet, so we'll see how that goes at a later point. I was like a final given, I took out an Ace, or a 2-1 Elite Vanguard, or whatever, and put in a Flicker Wisp, and I haven't used it at all yet, so... but people were like, and I understood what people were coming from. But that's Dream Puppets, that is the deck, that is the list. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, like, comment, subscribe. It helps this channel grow, which has been considerably recently. Let's have a look at what the subscribers are at. Right about now, should be over 700, I don't know. It's taking a really long time to load. Yeah, 737, it's pretty good. And if you liked what I do a lot of magic on my channel, which is always linked in the description. And yeah, hope you either watch some more from me or watch some more from this channel. Yeah, I'll see you guys later. Bye.